Hey Star Trek fans, Dan Gunther here. Welcome to another episode of Dan's Disco Deep Dives, looking at the Easter eggs, hidden bits, canon connections, and theories for new episodes of Star Trek Discovery. This week looking at Episode 8 of Season 2, If Memory Serves. If Memory Serves was written by Dan Dworkin and Jay Beatty, and directed by T.J. Scott. This episode is a direct sequel to The Cage, the unsold first pilot of Star Trek. The creators of the episode lean into that hard with a previously on Star Trek pre-roll rather than the standard previously on Star Trek Discovery. The pre-roll features clips and music from the initially unaired first pilot, highlighting the Enterprise's journey to Talos IV under the command of Captain Christopher Pike. I was extremely impressed with the decision to start the episode like this and embrace the links between these two episodes. Although some may be jarred by the visual differences, I love the idea that these two visions of Star Trek can exist side by side. At the start of the episode, Burnham and Spock race to Talos IV, the location of the aforementioned first pilot episode of Star Trek, filmed way back in 1964. This pretty much makes this entire episode one big canon connection, but I'll break it down as we go. The computer informs Burnham that travel to Talos IV is forbidden by Federation law, but there is still no mention of the death penalty imposed by General Order 7. It's unclear if the penalty doesn't exist yet, or if the writers are simply ignoring it as it doesn't really fit with how we understand the Federation and Starfleet to operate. Perhaps this question will be answered in a future episode, but for now, it's all just speculation. Interestingly, the four admirals who contact Captains Leland and Georgiou represent all four founding races of the Federation: Vulcan, Human, Andorian, and Tellarite. Once again, the mysterious Control is mentioned, directing the efforts of Section 31 from behind the scenes. Fans of the Star Trek novels have already made a connection between Control, as mentioned in Discovery, and the Uri-I artificial intelligence conceived of by author David Mack in his novel Section 31, Control. I have resisted making this connection as the author has said on social media that they are unconnected. However, in this episode, Control is explicitly referred to as an artificial intelligence. Perhaps there is more of a connection there than I thought.
No, it was a test. We're really on the other side of the looking glass now, aren't we?
When Burnham and Spock arrive at Talos IV, we can see that it is the same location used for the planet Harlak in the first season episode The Wolf Inside. This quarry, located outside Toronto, Ontario, would seem to be a go-to location for alien vistas, much like the Bronson Canyon and Vasquez Rocks were for earlier Star Trek series. The weird alien planet sound effects from TOS are apparent in this episode, as is the purported source of the sound, the blue singing plants of Talos IV, first seen in The Cage, and given a modern facelift in this episode. Also returning from The Cage is the character of Vina, a human woman who survived a crash on the barren world. She was repaired by the Talosians, who intended to use her to create a slave race of humans by luring Captain Christopher Pike to their world. Their plan ultimately failed, and this episode shows us a reunion of sorts between Vina and Pike. They would reunite once again a decade later, during the events of the original series' two-part episode, The Menagerie. Lieutenant Commander Arium reports that the probe that attacked the shuttle in the previous episode used SQL injections to gain access to Discovery's database. SQL, or Structured Query Language, was developed in the 1970s as a programming language for interacting with databases. Looks like they built that language to last. Following the fight between Ash and Hugh in the mess hall, we see a number of drones cleaning up the resulting mess and resetting the furniture. Are these standard equipment, or have Jet Reno's kids been put to use on Discovery? Either way, we finally get to see the realization of Riker's comment in TNG that the ship cleans itself. The vision of the future provided to Spock by the Red Angel would appear to show a number of Federation worlds being destroyed. Indeed, Spock says it is the end of all sentient life in our galaxy. Of the worlds shown, we see Earth, a number of other planets, and also what looks to be Andoria. It looks very similar to how it appeared in Star Trek Enterprise. Lieutenant Commander Arium was played in the first season by actress Sarah Mittich, and in Season 2 by Hannah Cheesman. Sarah Middich was seen in the first episode of this season as another character, Lieutenant Nilsson. She returns in this episode once again as Nilsson, seen in engineering as the Discovery attempts to use the spore drive to travel to Talos 4. Tilly mentions a corruption in Duotronics when the spore drive fails to engage. Duotronics are the basis of Starfleet computing systems in the 23rd century. They were invented by computing pioneer Dr. Richard Daystrom, whom we meet in the TOS episode, The Ultimate Computer. This episode establishes that Starbase 11 is 2 light-years from Talos 4. Starbase 11 appears in 2 episodes of the original series. The aforementioned two-parter, The Menagerie, wherein Spock mutinies and takes the Enterprise along with Fleet Captain Pike to Talos 4, and the episode Court Martial, where Captain Kirk is put on trial for criminal negligence causing death, in the apparent death of Lieutenant Commander Ben Finney. Michael Burnham reveals that she ran away from home into Vulcan's Forge in her youth. Vulcan's Forge has been mentioned numerous times before, but was first mentioned in the animated series episode Yesteryear. The Forge was also the setting for the Enterprise episode, The Forge. Pretty creative naming of that episode. Burnham mentions that the mind scanner that Section 31 was planning to use on Spock in the previous episode is based on Terran Empire technology. Presumably, it was introduced to Section 31 by former Emperor Georgiou. Might the Klingons somehow get their hands on it for the mind sifter that Kor mentions in the TOS episode Errand of Mercy? At the end of the episode, Georgiou reveals that the Telosians attempted to use their power of illusion on her in her own native universe. In response, she, quote, blew them and their stupid singing plants off the face of the planet. I, however, am skeptical. Did she really do that? Or did the Telosians just make her think she did? During the flashback to Spock and Burnham as children, we hear a little bit of what caused the rift between these two characters. At one point, Burnham calls Spock a weird little half-breed, which might account for Spock's reaction to Kirk when he uses the term in order to get a rise out of Spock and overcome the influence of the spores in the original series episode, This Side of Paradise. In addition to the Telosian singing plants, there are a few other sound effects that are borrowed from the original series, and specifically the pilot episode The Cage. For one, the little flourish whenever Telosian illusions appear or disappear. And there's a hint of the old-school transporter sound effect when the faux Spock and Burnham beam aboard the Section 31 ship. As usual, before I get to my theory, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the theories and comments you guys left on last week's deep dive video. Rebecca Hay says, I can't wait to find out more about Arium. The Red Angel looked female, but I don't think it's anyone we know. Maybe it's the other Amanda. Was her name Amanda? You know, the one from True Q, misbehaving by doing good deeds and disguising herself as an angel. I also find myself drifting off to Season 3 and a possible Prime Lorca. And lastly, it's a bit sad that when you die as a Vulcan, your Katra is just going to sit in a box for all eternity. Do they telepathically talk to the other Katras in the other boxes? Great comment, thank you so much. First of all, yes, her name was Amanda Rogers, played by Olivia Diabo in the TNG episode True Q. I really love that character, and I don't think there's a connection, but I like the way you think. Also, yes, I really hope we do see Prime Lorca at some point, mostly because Jason Isaacs is a treasure, and I'd love to have him back on the show. And finally, regarding the Catric arcs that hold the Vulcan Katras just sitting in a box for all eternity, I've always had the same thought, you know, they just sit there kind of doing nothing until some, you know, pilgrim comes along and mind melds with a box to get some insight or something. That really seems like a boring way to spend eternity, and I think I'd rather my Katra just be lost rather than stuck in that box forever. Zamboni Josiah has an interesting theory this week. He says that Arium definitely isn't the Red Angel. The entity that modified the probe and infected Arium is Control. In the Section 31 novels, the Control that performs threat assessment and directs Section 31 orders is actually an artificial intelligence, and that premise seems to have been officially canonized by tonight's episode. What if the entity that wishes to destroy all sentient life is Control, having gone all Skynet? What if the Vidraish that Kraft was escaping in Calypso is the remains of the Federation under the direct control of Section 31 AI, hence why humans are its enemy? I love linking the Vidraish. We know that that is kind of a shorthand for the Federation, and linking that whole part of the story to what we see in Spock's mind in this past week's episode is very compelling. I hadn't thought of that, and I think that's a really great angle. And Agraperma has a theory. What if Vina and Pike are both the Red Angels from the future? The death penalty would be put in place if there was a threat of any outside interference that might change the evolution of the Telosians. I mean, if you have knowledge that a particular species is involved with saving humanity in the future, would you allow risk of any meddling in their past? An interesting idea for why we might see the death penalty imposed on travel to Talos 4 in the future. Very cool. I like that. For my theory this week, I'm definitely abandoning last week's theory that Arium is the Red Angel. I definitely agree that that is not the case. It seems that we're getting two different factions becoming apparent here. The probes, for lack of a better term, that seem to be determined to wipe out all sentient life in the galaxy, and the Red Angels who are trying to stop that from happening. I do, however, still think that the intelligence that we see controlling the probes is the intelligence from on board the Discovery's probe that has evolved over the course of those 5 centuries and becomes something that we're not expecting. I really like Zamboni Josiah's idea that it's Control. I hadn't thought of that myself, and I'm not convinced that it is Control, but I think that's a really interesting angle. But regardless, I do think that a predestination paradox will be involved in that Discovery and the crew is responsible somehow for the creation of this whatever intelligence it is that's trying to wipe out everyone in the Milky Way galaxy. So not really a far-reaching theory this week, just kind of simple and maybe kind of obvious from what we see in the trailers, but who knows, the story might go in a completely different direction that we're not expecting. So I want to hear your guys' theories because you guys always come up with some really cool stuff. So let me know in the comments what you think is going on and where you think this season of Discovery is going. And in the meantime, all that's left is for me to thank you all very much for watching, and thanks especially to the Patreon supporters who really help out with these videos. And a reminder, I've gotten a couple new patrons in the last little while. I will be adding your names at the start of the next month, so thank you so much. I do appreciate that. Everyone else, please like, share, and subscribe if you think this video is worth it, and if you think someone out there might enjoy a more positive take on Discovery that I like to do on this channel. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video, and until next time, I have an illusion and you have reality. May you find your way as pleasant.